All right, so recording is going, so we'll get off here. So my name is Tyler Thomas. I'm a meteorologist here at the Grand Forks National Weather Service. I have Blake Rafferty here with me, also a meteorologist.
Yep, I am helping Tyler here, at least with the first few slides, with some general information before we get into the actual winter outlook. So, starting here, you want to click to the next slide, Tyler?
Yep.
So, we all know that you guys are trying to make decisions based off the weather forecast, and a lot of times it's not clear-cut what exactly is going to happen. There's rather different scenarios that could unfold. Think of a large storm system coming north, like a Colorado low, for example. You might be on the northern edge and get minimal snow accumulation, but if it tracks a little further north, it could bring strong winds, heavy snow, and full-on blizzard conditions. So our job is to make sure that you guys understand the full range of scenarios that could occur so you can make the best decision. How we do that, part of what we do is issuing headlines. So you'll see watches from us, winter storm watches. Those are issued 1 to 3 days out. It depends on what the probability of seeing a winter storm or a blizzard or an ice storm, etc., in our area is. So for us to issue a watch, it needs to be a 50% probability or a 50% chance that it's going to occur. And hopefully, as we get closer to the event, the probability goes up or down for your location, and we can determine what's going to happen there. So, maybe the probability of blizzard conditions is going up by the time we're within the 24-hour period. It's at 80%. Now we'll issue that blizzard warning. Conversely, maybe the probability went down, and now we don't need a headline for your area since the watch was just for a 50% chance that it was going to occur. Same is true for advisories, for advisory level impacts. So as we get 80%, we'll issue the advisory. Now this slide has a lot of information. I'm not going to go line by line because I don't want to bore you all with all this literature, but in the recording, if you want to see what goes into all our headline decisions, you can just pause the recording and read it for yourself. One thing too that needs to be considered with a headline is not just the chance or the probability it occurs at your location, but how is it going to occur, say, in your county or in your city, for example. You can have a small area of warning impacts, think like a blizzard, in, say, one corner of your county or 20% of the county, while the rest of the area is only getting advisory. So if you're driving through the county, impacts will be much greater if most of the county, 80% or more, is seeing those warning impacts versus just little pockets where you need to slow down. So that's something we also consider when finalizing headlines ahead of a winter storm. And then on top of that's the duration or the consistency. So if you're sitting, let's say in the city of Grand Forks or Langdon or Fargo or wherever, and you look out the window and it's blizzarding for 3 straight hours, by definition, that's a blizzard, you are going to have greater impacts because you never got a break. It's always those very poor conditions. But if you're getting like, say, snow squally type things where it's blizzard-like for 30 minutes and then it's a couple hours where visibility is 1 or 2 miles, impacts naturally are going to be less for that event. So here's a good example of that. This is a event from last winter, and this is looking at radar at 7 a.m. So you can see the golden dot near Hillsboro. There's near zero visibility in that area because there's falling snow and very strong northerly winds. Meanwhile, down by Fergus Falls in Otter Tail County, there's that white dot. No winter impacts are even being received yet. And as we go through time, impacts get even worse in the central Red River Valley at the yellow dot, which is where we have a snow squall warning now. That's the purple outlines. But Fergus Falls is still clear at 9 a.m. for 2 hours. So the impacts have gotten worse at one location and haven't changed at the other. Meanwhile, just a few hours later, at 11 a.m., you still have near zero visibility at Hillsboro, but look on either side of that yellow dot. No snow is falling. There's still winds, but there's not a lot of blowable snow. You're getting visibility more like a half mile to a mile. So that goes back to the duration and consistency. If you're outside of Hillsboro, it's a winter day in North Dakota. There's still impacts, but it's not reaching warning level. But there's that small sliver of the county where that snow band is going through that winter conditions are very severe, reaching warning, probably warning level. And then now Fergus Falls is also seeing a snow squall go through with warning level impacts with the snow squall warning. But for the rest of the morning, it's been very low impact. So impacts are tied to just that 15, 30, 45-minute period. And then moving forward, now Hillsboro just has blowing snow, much like the rest of the county had the rest of the day. Solid advisory level criteria. But Fergus Falls, again, has no impacts. Winds are much lighter there. There's no snow falling. So this goes to show that just because you have an advisory out You could have brief periods or some locations with warning impacts, but the vast majority of the county is not going to see that. And then conversely, you can have conditions get very poor, like in Fergus Falls, for a small amount of time, and then they rapidly improve again. And so that warning, while for a short period, did have high impacts over that short amount of time. Finally, you get to see again, Hillsborough goes back to near zero. So the snow band rolls back over them, but everyone else, it's just another winter day in North Dakota. And this kind of is a guide to what our headline decisions look like. It takes duration and coverage into account when we're thinking of visibility impacts from blowing snow. So low to moderate, that's where you're getting isolated to scattered type of impacts. That would be an advisory type day. But it's when you get into the purples and reds, the high and frequent constant blizzard conditions, that's when we need a warning headline out. And you can occasionally get, blizzard conditions within a moderate risk or a moderate category of duration and coverage, but they're going to be much more isolated and last for much less time. And that kind of is broken down into how our headlines are figured out. Snow squalls are less than 30 minutes. Winter storm warnings, you're looking more like 30 minutes to 3 hours. And the blizzard is the true 3 hours, quarter-mile visibility, whiteout conditions. And obviously a blizzard that's 3 hours long is going to have lower impacts than a blizzard that's, say, 12 or 15 hours long. So duration is a major component of our thinking when we're thinking of headlines. Then lastly here, just a reminder, this was new last winter, but extreme cold watch, wind chill watch, they've been consolidated the extreme cold watch now. The extreme cold warning and the wind chill warning been consolidated to the extreme cold warning. And a wind chill advisory is now a cold weather advisory. This was, again, in effect last winter, but just as a reminder, since it's only the second winter this is happening, this is for when those temperatures or the wind chill reach that value. We're not just looking at wind chill. So here's our criteria for a cold weather advisory, 30 below zero for our entire area. And you can see as you go south, obviously the criteria is lower. And then extreme cold warning is 40 below for our forecast area. With that, I will turn it over to Tyler. He'll give you all the information about the upcoming winter.
Yep, so I'm sure this is a lot more of what you guys thought you were in for signing up for this. So thanks for that recap on how we go about headline decisions, Blake. So we'll kick it off here with what is ENSO? So the El Nino Southern Oscillation. Right now we are in the cold phase called La Niña, where those ocean temperature anomalies relative to average, so whether the average is 25 degrees Celsius, 28, 30, whatever, we're in the cooler phase of that, so we're below whatever that threshold is for technically average, quote unquote. So kind of what does La Nina look like? Well, typically we end up with stronger trade winds across the equatorial Pacific as we have some kind of colder water upwelling off the Ecuador, Central America coast, moving west towards south of Hawaii there in the equatorial Pacific. What does that result in? We start to get an enhanced Pacific jet stream across the, say, Gulf of Alaska into Pacific Northwest with a more variable polar jet across to Alaska and interior Canada. That generally leads to colder conditions across the northern plains with kind of wetter conditions across the majority of the Great Lakes area and then, of course, the Pacific Northwest as well. So again, what is ENSO? When we're talking about El Nino Southern Oscillation, we're really talking about this area kind of in the central equatorial Pacific, south of Hawaii. Specifically, this area actually correlates better in terms of winter impacts to the East Coast and Northeast, which makes sense when we're thinking about how we want to forecast winter. We want to think about where the majority of the US population lives, which is, say, your Texas, Florida, New York's. As a lot of us know, it's pretty rural here in North Dakota, not the most dense population. Our area that actually correlates best in terms of ENSO is this Nino 1 and 2 off the Ecuador coast. Again, this area is also kind of in an ENSO neutral La Nina phase right now, but not as strong of a signal as Nino 3.4 is showing. And I'll show you why that matters going forward. So here's kind of our verification for last year, that 24-25 winter. We did kind of meet that La Nina threshold very briefly, but we're looking for 3 months consecutively, or really November, December, February, or November, December, January, December, January, February, and then January, February, March kind of period. So that real core winter period, reaching that negative 0.5 threshold. We didn't technically actually meet that last year. We only had these 2 periods meeting that threshold. So we technically stayed in ENSO neutral through all of last year. Right now, this is kind of where we are ending at May. There's not really a recent graphic going past May, so that's kind of where it ends right now. But if you look at current trends, we're sitting somewhere over here around that minus 0.3 threshold, so still an ENSO neutral. What does this look like going forward this year? Well, right now we're sitting at that minus 0.33 C, which places us in that ENSO neutral status. So that's this dot right here, that August OB. Going forward, kind of looking at the median percentiles, that higher confidence box in this darker blue outline, that does take us to that minus 0.5 threshold, putting us in a weak La Nina phase through the winter. So actually really similar to what we were in last winter. So even before we get to what the winter is going to look like, what do we look like here in the next couple of days to the end of the month? There's actually going to be kind of some whiplash here as we are looking at colder temperatures here this week, kind of that below average to near average, swing into much higher confidence and above average temps towards the end of the month, with that 70 to 80% chance of above average temps for that October 24th to 30th period. Now, this is chance for purely above and below normal. This has no bearing on magnitude of above or below normal. So this isn't saying that this dark red is going to be 80 degrees. It's just saying that if our average is 50, we're likely to be above that, not by how much. And then looking at the precip, there is a slight lean for kind of that southeast North Dakota and west central Minnesota, and that 33 to 40% chance of leaning above normal precip in that kind of 2-week period from now. So how does that break down? Even though there is that very high confidence in above normal temperatures in this 2-week from now period, there is still about 3% chance that we actually fall below normal over the course of that period. And then pretty even splits across the board for precip chances, actually. So that above normal leaning, really not holding a lot of bearing, but kind of a slight lean of just maybe some more active weather that we've been seeing here recently. So what is November going to look like? Really equal chances across the board of that above, below, and even near normal for temps here. And this is kind of variable as average high temps across the board for November really swing drastically from the start of the month to the end of the month. And I'll show that here on the next slide. But then looking at monthly precip, again, looking to stay kind of above normal in terms of precip, a little more on the active side with more of those clippers and upper lows moving through, just bringing periodic precip chances. So not the August and September that we really had, where it was just really dry for a couple weeks on end there. And then breaking that down, pretty equal chances across the board for that above and below normal. And then you see that slight lean above normal for precip. So looking at what does normal actually look like? Well, we can see starting in the month of November 1st, we have average high temps around 45, but by the end of the month, we're dropping all the way to 27. So you might think, wow, 55 degrees is pretty above normal November 1st. If we got to November 30th and it was 55, we'd probably be looking somewhat close to record high temps. So there is quite a variance in what above normal or below normal means across these transition swing periods. And then kind of looking at what our monthly snow and even seasonal snow looks like throughout the year. Kind of that October through May season, pretty rare that we have snow outside of those timeframes. Looking at probably about 38 to 42 inches for the eastern North Dakota, northwest Minnesota area across those seasons, and really those core months of November through April, where we have most of that snow. Even after April 1st, somewhat rare that we really have accumulating snow between warm ground temps, starting to have mixed precipitation type issues with sleet and freezing rain mixing in as we start to have some of those warmer temps. So really, even looking at October, statistically we average around 1 inch. And that might actually happen, as if you've looked at some of that longer range guidance going into maybe Monday and Tuesday, there's a chance that we could have some backside snow. Would it accumulate? Probably not. Ground's still pretty warm and temperatures are probably likely to swing back above 32 degrees as soon as the sun rises. But to see our first snowflakes of the season, entirely possible early next week. Now, here's what you've all been waiting for. Here's the official CPC winter December, January, February outlook. Again, not magnitude of above or below normal, but confidence in above or below normal. So we're looking at higher confidence in below normal temperatures across the northern tier of the US with above average chances of precip as well. So putting two together, we can probably assume that we're going to have above normal chances of snowfall relative to the climate period for these areas between December, January, and February. So we're looking at a more active winter potentially. Breaking that down, this will be the last one that we break down. You can go find these on the CPC website as well with the interactive maps if you want to look at your point specifically, if you're in Fargo or Langdon or perhaps Bemidji. About 43% chance of leaning above normal for that December, January, February time period in the eastern North Dakota, northwest Minnesota area, with a slightly leaning above average normal chance of 40% for precip. And we can see that for those 3 months, we average about 1.8 inches of precip. Converting that to snow, assuming a 10-to-1 ratio, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, would be about 10.8 inches. So about a foot of snow. How does that stack up here on that December, January timeframe? That would actually be about half of what we normally see. So take these with a grain of salt. It's all averages and kind of equals out after a certain period. Kind of looking at the next time frame, January, February, March, again, below normal temperatures, above normal precip, kind of more equal chances as we head down into that far southeast corner of North Dakota and west central Minnesota, but that's probably a wash of just how specific can we really get with these outlooks. We can only draw them so perfect, and it's an outlook at the end of the day where there's going to be dry periods intermixed with wetter periods. It's about averages over a really long period of time. Looking at February, March, and April, again, still leaning below normal for temperatures. And now we're starting to see a shift towards maybe some more normal periods of a winter storm 1 week, dry for several days, and then maybe a clipper. So that really just keeps us near that average precipitation, not looking above normal, not looking to swing into drought rapidly as soon as the spring starts melting or something. And then that last period, March, April, May, still looking slightly below normal for temperatures, but maybe starting to swing back normal to average by this point. And then still seeing that above normal signal across the Great Lakes, but maybe not bleeding as far west as we are. So kind of what does typical La Nina impacts look like? Well, October through November, as we kind of saw in those outlooks, still looking well above normal for the October and November timeframe, but we quickly swing to those colder temperatures as those outlooks saw December, January, February, and beyond of colder than normal temperatures. And then kind of what does a weak La Nina like we might experience this winter look like? That signal is a little more muted, not as strong for those above and below normal temperatures, but it still definitely shows that signal. So kind of a map to look at what does precip specifically look like. You can really see how spotty just a La Nina winter is. There's pockets of above, there's pockets of below, but there's no solid swaths really to really just nail home of we know La Nina always gives us 20 inches more of snow than normal or something, or 15 inches below. Kind of percent of average winters with precip across all La Ninas, most tend to give us above normal, but not by that much. So this is a little more technical, kind of looking at climate divisions. This one specifically is about the eastern half of North Dakota, and you can assume that the northwest quarter of Minnesota is pretty similar in terms of numbers. Kind of have the Grand Forks line here and those bigger dashed lines, and then the Fargo line of seasonal average up above that. So we can see Fargo averages slightly more than Grand Forks, but not statistically significantly more. What you can notice is that across all seasons and all ENSO phases, we're really pretty equal with no real signal from that December, January timeframe. But as we shift into those spring times, we do see a much stronger signal of those ENSO neutral and La Nina phases really start to give us increased precip over an El Nino or even the climate mean. So kind of what goes into a winter outlook, it's a lot more than just ENSO. We have our Madden-Julian oscillation, our Arctic oscillation, the NAO, polar vortex, which I know is a lot, kind of a big buzzword in the media sphere these days of just, is this cold air outbreak caused by a polar vortex or something perhaps? And then many other things as well. These are much more small scale, shorter time frame duration. So these might have predictability in the order of weeks to maybe a month, rather than ENSO, which typically carries a couple months to even a year. These much more drastically drive what the local pattern is going to be. ENSO kind of separates what a hemispheric or even a continental pattern, not on the order of a state perhaps. So kind of getting into what is our actual forecast this winter. This is a local experimental machine learning model that we developed in-house. This was just completed last night, so these are current numbers. What's an average winter look like in terms of winter storms and or blizzards? About 5 events. So if you're in Fargo, that probably sounds about right. If we have 5 strong northwest flow events where we just have a valley blizzard. If you're in Langdon, this number might seem a little low, as it feels like almost every day is a blizzard up there sometimes. If you're over in the trees in Bemidji, it might feel really high of sometimes the trees just keep the wind down and stuff doesn't feel as bad maybe. So kind of breaking it down by month, kind of looking at a quieter November, maybe a 50% chance for one major-ish winter storm. But then as we head into December, January, February, those odds really tick up of 70% chance or greater for at least 2 storms. And then how many storms are we looking at over the course of the season? Probably about 6 to 10. Granted, we're looking at the area as a whole, not a point. So this isn't saying Grand Forks is going to see 10 events. Grand Forks might only see 4 or 5 of them. So that's kind of how that works. And then kind of what's the baseline of what we're expecting this winter? About average. Average is 5. We're looking at kind of a minimum of maybe 4. And then this model did kind of show a high tail of that 10% chance of maybe 11 to 15 events. So we kind of went with the median there of 13 events. So kind of summary of all that. What is our forecast for eastern North Dakota and northwest Minnesota this year? If average is 38 to 42 inches for the Grand Forks, Fargo, even our office, my forecast would probably be about 50 to 60 inches. I know Megan's outlook yesterday over for Bismarck in the western half of the state was 60 to 70. We did kind of see those precip chances trending a little more towards near normal to maybe slightly above normal rather than that 50 to 60% chance that they had earlier in the season. So that's kind of why our number might be a little lower. Average number of winter storms and or blizzards, average is 5, we're forecasting 6 to 10 across the entire area. Again, not for a single point. And then we are seeing that consistent signal for below average temperatures. Temperatures are going to vary from day to day, week to week. There's still going to be warm and cold periods over shorter time scales. So it's not saying it's going to be -10 from December through February, but we are probably still going to have that week of 40 in January and that week of -30 wind chills in December and January. So with that, I'll wrap it up and let you guys ask if you have any questions. And again, if you feel like you don't want to ask anything here, these slides will be sent out later with the recording. My contact info is there at the bottom, and you can also call our office anytime, request a forecaster, or request my name if I'm not in the office. Thank you. Blake, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions to get us started, but yeah, don't be shy. You can let us know now, or we're here all the time, every hour of every day you can imagine, so you can always get a hold of us.
What are your thoughts on that outlook, Blake? You a fan of this maybe above normal winter, finally swinging back from these 30-inch winters that we've had the last 2 years?
I'm really tired of these not as snowy winters the past couple of years. I'm ready for some snow. Not necessarily cold, but I'm ready for some snow, and I prefer winter over summer. So
same. A little more of a winter guy myself. Not looking for maybe weeks on end blizzards, but
exactly.
Could use enough snow to maybe do some cross-country skiing up here.
Exactly.
Still not seeing any questions in there. Again, we'll be on here for another 5 or 10 minutes if you want to stick around until maybe some more people drop off. But also feel free to email me any questions you might have if you want to set up an interview perhaps. But yeah, appreciate everyone coming. That's all we have for today.